Welcome to Design to Move, a weekly functional movement series reviewing common movement impairment syndromes, muscle imbalances, and injury cycles and how to correct for them. Don't just exercise, but restore optimal movement. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Design to Move. My name is Ryan Maxwell, and again, this is Ryan Park. We're two movement specialists here with Fluid Health and Fitness, and today we're going to go into gluteal inhibition. Inhibition is a word for the inability to engage or to facilitate the contracture of a certain muscle. So a lot of you guys, we have clients all day long who talk about being unable to engage their glutes, or they're not able to, again, get the definition or the aesthetic associated with the engagement of their glutes. Well, today we're going to show you how to actually get your gluteals to get more engagement by reducing muscle groups that have a typical compensation or inhibitory impact on the glutes, namely the quadriceps, the front hip flexor muscles, and the hamstrings, the extension muscles that are the secondary relationship for hip extension. If you take those two relationships out, you should be able to have a stronger engagement of the gluteals. Okay, these are external muscle groups that oftentimes compensate. So we're going to show you how to do that today. If you have questions on any of the information that we go over, make sure to reach out to us at admin@fluidhealthandfitness.com. We did write a blog on the topic, so if you want to read more about what this whole issue is and the mechanics and the issues around it, why it happens, make sure to read that. It's in the description down there. And we do have a table of contents to the side here, and that gives you timestamps of all the segments that we're going to go through, as well as a condensed version of the video at the bottom, so that if you want to just use this as a review, you can always go to that very end position. As usual, we do offer a free movement assessment. So we want to make sure, guys, if you have questions specific to your own body's distortions or movement imbalances, make sure to reach out to us once again at admin@fluidhealthandfitness.com. And we do offer this virtually free through the internet. Okay? So on that, let's get into our topic on gluteal inhibition. Our first segment is on mobility and release. This is where we show you how to reduce the overactive muscle groups. For today's topic, we're going to be targeting the quadricep muscle, specifically the medial and lateral quadricep muscle, and the lateral hamstring, the bicep femoris. For the quads, you will need a ball. We have our soft core ball here. It's our fluid ball. For the hamstrings, we're just going to be doing a neuromuscular stretch. Let's get right to it. The first muscle we're going to target is the rectus femoris and the lateralis. These are quadricep muscles, and they allow us to extend our knee or straighten our knee out. And the rectus actually helps to lift the leg up. Now, functionally, they also attach to the pelvis, and they help to pull the pelvis down anteriorly, which means down towards the floor. A lot of times when that goes on, it pulls the pelvis downward and it stretches through the gluteals, making them, again, inactive. So what we want to do is reduce the pressure from these quad muscles so that we can get more engagement out of the glutes. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is get our ball out. You could use a foam roller. There's all sorts of different ways you could approach this. For us, we're going to use a foam core ball. Seems to be the most effective in getting the muscle to relax. And our goal is to try to get more range of motion from the knee and from the hip. So I should be able to bring my leg back behind me more without my hip dumping down. That's an important factor if we want to get our glutes to fire. So Ryan's on top of the ball. He's got his opposite leg out into the side of his body. That's called abduction and flexion. He's supporting his spine through his, again, abdominals, and he's got his weight over his shoulders, or his shoulders over his elbows, so he's supporting his upper thoracic. Now he's allowing the weight of his leg to basically compress down on the medial or the middle quad muscle, the rectus femoris. It would be right above the kneecap, so you can see it under here. And he's just going to sit there holding it under pressure until he gets the initial relaxing, function, or the lengthening function out of the stretch from the pressure from the ball. So that's called a passive release. Once the ball starts to sink in a little bit, and he's going to feel that, he can encourage it by breathing out, flexing his abs, breathing in and sinking. And as he does this, you'll start to naturally feel the fibers of that muscle relax. And as soon as he feels that, he's going to start to go into a bending of the knee. Now, as he bends the knee, this is called a pin and stretch or flossing technique. And he's literally pulling the muscle fibers through the tension being exerted between the ball and the femur. And then he's breathing and relaxing and sinking into the ball. This pin and stretch and articulation of the joint helps to lengthen these muscle fibers. And if there's adhesive tissue, or again, maybe microtraumas that have developed into adhesive tissue, you can almost feel it come up to the surface of the ball, and you can almost block it. Okay, so the bottom line is you don't want to pull so hard or bend so hard that it slides past and you actually pass over the fascial tissue, you want to only come up to it and kind of shear it away. So it's almost like you're kneading dough and pushing it away. Now as you do that, every time the muscle should lengthen a little bit, give you a little bit less pressure, and you should be able to sink in to the belly of the muscle, and it may actually engage a little bit more of these no-see pain receptors, so it feels a little bit more uncomfortable each time, but you'll get deeper and deeper. Now by doing that, you'll get into the deeper fascial beds, and that should allow you to start getting some separation from these fibers. And again, because these muscles all connect together in the front of the quads, you could orient the ball in different areas between the heads of the muscles, intermedialis, vastus medialis, vastus lateralis, start to break open those proteins so they slide nice over each other. That's for another video. Today, we're just gonna stay on the rectus femoris. You're gonna go through that, again, about 6 to 10 times with the knee bend and release. Okay, once you're done with the rectus, you can just shift your center of mass over a little bit. So he's gonna literally just roll onto the ball over a little bit more and get into the vastus lateralis. That's the lateral quadricep muscle. It attaches the lateral patella or kneecap up to the greater trochanter of the hip, again into the pelvis. So again, it helps with lateral extension or abduction as the knee flexes too, and it helps to, again, elongate the knee. And it also functionally decelerates the knee internally, or helps to decelerate internally. So a lot of times we overuse it because our butt's not strong enough to support the femur. So he's gonna be on the lateral side, and now he's gonna go through the same mechanisms, holding it there, passive release, wait for the initial response or release response, and then he's gonna start moving through the knee. Now again, because of its lateral pull on the kneecap, you're gonna wanna be careful of that. So what you're gonna wanna do is make sure that you rotate your toe internally, get the tibia to rotate in medially as you bend the knee, so you don't feel as much lateral pressure being exerted on that patella, so it doesn't want to pull away and create patella maltracking. So again, we would do this for about 6 to 10 repetitions. We would breathe in as we kick the knee back, breathe out as we come back down, breathe in, flex the glute as you bend the knee on the same hemisphere, breathe out, sink back down into it, go through multiple iterations, and that's going to be it for the quadriceps. Now we're going to get into the hamstrings. Okay, so the hamstring, and specifically the bicep femoris. The bicep femoris is the outer lateral hamstring. It attaches down here on the fibula. The lower portion of it attaches to the actual femur, and then it elongates up all the way up to the ischium, and it helps to, again, bend the knee. So it bends the knee, it extends the leg back, but it also externally rotates at the tibia, okay? Now, the point is that sometimes when our glutes aren't firing, our hamstrings like to do all the work of hip extension, or they take on a dominant role in hip extension, and that can then create all sorts of instability around the pelvis as it starts to move our pelvis around. It can also create too much mobility through the tibia, and then we'll get lateral torsion through the tibia, and that leads to all sorts of subluxation issues, kneecap issues, etc., etc. So either way, something that we're going to want to take out either way and start to get more length relationship. Ideally, you'd like to see that you can get your femur up to 90 degrees of flexion without seeing that pelvis dip under. That's going on, it might be an issue why you can't get your glutes to fire, okay? So we're gonna work on that. Now I wanna do it from a seated position, a more stable position. We've shown you in times past how to do a standing stretch of this muscle, but we're gonna do it from a seated position, give you guys a little more stability so you can focus on the stretch and maybe not the balance component of it, okay? So Ryan's gonna stick his leg out. All right, he's gonna choose his left leg. So the leg's gonna rotate internally. He's gonna keep his kneecap extended, that means straightened. And immediately what we wanna make sure of is our hip bones. So are our hip bones equal to each other? Notice also, is his back nice and long? So is he extended through the spine? We wanna try to keep an upright vertical center of mass. His head should be in line, back with his TL junction. His head is slightly tucked under. The curvature of his lumbar spine is nice and neutral, so it's a slight dip inward. And he's gonna push down on his right heel, flexing through his glute, and then he's gonna arch his back and tip forward. As he tips forward, he's going to extend his left arm behind him on the same hemisphere. He's gonna depress and retract it, so he's gonna get some inferior posterior tension through the lat on the left, and then he's gonna go into protraction on the right shoulder, meaning he's gonna glide his scapula around the rib, pushing down towards the toe. So he's rotating a little bit through the trunk, and he's gonna breathe inward. Deep breath in, hold the arch in the lower back, and then breathe out. Flex his abdominals, reach forward through, keeping his back arched, until he gets to the first in-cap range of motion through the hamstring. That's where he starts to feel the pull, but it's not pulling so hard that it distorts his hip bones, his lower back, his knee from bending or buckling, or his toe to drop down and then rotate outward. So if you see any of that, you've gone too far. So he's at his bottom position, and at this bottom position now, he's gonna start to bend the knee using traction, digging his heel into the ground, bending the knee to get some pressure on the hamstring. He's gonna hold it there for 6 seconds. Now the pressure of that is going to create an inhibitory element on the muscle, so it wants to lengthen. So then he's gonna let it go, soften it for a second, pull the toe up, see if you can get deeper stretch out of the calf, and by extension the hamstring. Breathe in, breathe out, sit deeper into it, letting the femur glide in the socket, get down to that new in-cap range of motion, no pain. Ryan's trying to get up there with his chin. That's a no-no. We're gonna keep the head in line with the ribs. And then he's gonna bend it again, flex it down, and get more pressure. This is called a push-pull release or a neuromuscular stretch. We're exciting the muscle, putting it under flexion, and then we're gonna relax it. There's a natural inhibitory function. The muscle wants to let go, the muscle spindles will let go, and you'll be able to get deeper into the stretch. And then he's again going down into the stretch and looking for, again, more range of motion. So what you can find is that over the course of multiple flex and release, you should be able to get more and more axis of rotation and flexion through the hip, with once again not showing the pelvic tilt under, the again thoracic dumping forward. You shouldn't see the opposite rib cage, in this case it would be his right rib cage. You wouldn't see it start to rotate open and expose itself into retraction. If you see that, that hamstring's kicking your butt, literally. But either way, it's gonna impact your ability to engage your abdominals on the opposite hemisphere, and that will impact your functional movement. So again, make sure that the stretch does not dissociate the pelvis. It doesn't let the knee buckle. It doesn't let the toe dump down and out. And it doesn't reflect in your neck as you start to see your head jet forward, okay? If you do it right, you'll get more range of motion, and you'll probably be able to stand up and feel your glutes, probably like you haven't felt in quite a while if you're watching this video. So get after it, and we're gonna get to activation. Our next segment is called activation. Here's where we show you how to specifically target the underactive muscles in the body. Today we're actually going to target the gluteal complex. There's 3 muscles, your maximus, medius, and minimus. And we're going to help to show you how to engage all of those by going into a hip extension in a laying prone position with a subtle internal rotation. What we're trying to do is target the muscles that basically attach to the closer approximation of the femur rather than using the distal muscles like the hamstrings. Distal means farther away, proximal means closer. A lot of times we like to use our superficial phasic muscles like our quads and our hamstrings rather than using our gluteals for hip extension. And hip extension basically means that the leg is going behind you, so it would lift behind you. So if he was standing up, his leg would go back into extension. Now again, if the quads are tight, you'd notice that if he lifts up, bends the knee, the hip is going to pivot up and rotate out. And that's how we create hypermotion into the lumbar spine, and how we could see a reduction in the gluteal contraction, right? So main thing here, guys, is before you attempt doing these exercises, you want to make sure that you don't move the hip around. You want the femur to glide in the socket of the pelvis without seeing any kind of movement from the pelvis itself, okay? Now in order to do that, you're going to want to engage your abdominals. So he's going to breathe out, lock his abs down, he's holding the pelvis in a neutral position, and then he's going to lift his leg back. Now as he lifts, the goal is to get the knee off the table, but without seeing any extra movement or anterior drop of the pelvis. If you see that when your knee is bent at a full 90 degrees and you can't get the hip to stay down, bring it down into a lesser knee flexion so you're not getting as much stretch out of the quad. That way you can actually get the glute to fire. Now if you force it by forcing the knee into flexion and forcing the leg up higher than you can, your back's going to start to extend, you're going to start using your lower back musculature, your hamstrings, and maybe even just the lateral portion of your hip extensors like your piriformis and your glute maximus. We're looking for all the gluteals to fire, hence the reason we want there to be a medial orientation, meaning a subtle internal rotation. So he's gonna turn the toe in, bend the knee only to the point where he can lift this hip up without seeing hypermotion into his lower back, He's gonna breathe out and lift the leg up. He can feel the contraction. He knows that if it's too much, his heel is gonna start to rotate inward, his knee is gonna start to abduct and externally rotate outward, and that's not what we're looking for. We're gonna keep it in line with the midline of the body and then slowly come down. Now, for some of you, you may have maybe an inch, a half an inch of extension off the table, and that's okay. Don't go further. As soon as you start to feel more engagement of only the hamstring, maybe it'll even spasm on you, or you start to feel the lower back, that's a good indication that the muscle tension relationships between the front and the back side are not where they should be, and you need to reduce your range of motion. We see this all the time. People think they have more available motion than they do, and they never get the contracture that they're looking for. Remember, the body develops in stages, in little centimeters and even millimeters. So slow and stable is going to win the game, and over the course of time, you'll start to see a stronger contracture of your glute. So one more time, knee's gonna be bent, subtle internal rotation, breathe out to support the pelvis, lock the abs down, lift the leg up as high as you can without saying, again, hyper dump of the hip, and then bring it down slowly to a count of 4. And if you really want to challenge, try not to let the knee sit down on the table. You're going to keep it under, again, engagement or a contraction the entire time. So we would do 2 sets of 20 repetitions, give yourself a minute of time in between, do both sides, and then you should feel your glute, hopefully, kick in. Okay, that's how we target the gluteals. Let's get into the next section. Our next segment is integration. Here's where we show you how to get the muscles to fire in the order that's responsible for providing for efficient anatomical movement, or movement that doesn't create excess motion that leads to injury cycles. So today we're going to show you from a side lying position exercise that's called a window washer. It's basically a hip extension with an abduction at the bottom using a little bit of traction on the wall. All you're going to need is a sock and a wall for this. So let's get you up. This is a physiotherapy exercise designed to activate or engage your glute, and specifically your glute medius. A lot of times we have weak glute medius muscles, which help to keep our pelvic obliquity or list from occurring, as that keeps our center of mass close to the midline. But today we're going to show you how to engage the extension mechanism by getting the knee to extend and then push back up into abduction, or again, away from the body. So it's going to help us to get more engagement of your glutes, a stretch of the hamstrings, and again, more focus on the hip extension mechanics through the gluteal complex. So you'll notice Ryan's against the wall. He's got his body positioned so that his head's in line with the wall. He can actually feel his head touch the wall. His back is touching the wall through the rib cage, and his hips are touching. So he's flat against the wall, helping to maintain a neutral spinal alignment. Now his front legs, or both of his legs are tucked up into the fetal position, and his top leg, his left leg, has the shoe off. That way he can slide his foot against the wall and create some traction. So you literally are pushing into the wall and away, almost like you would be taking, again, a step down and push through. So the mechanics are, again, slight knee bend to extension, where you're pushing down into the wall and back through into extension. Now the difference is we're gonna abduct a little bit to help to engage those medials, like the med and min. So again, he's gonna draw his leg up into a knee bend. He's gonna put his heel onto the wall, keeping his foot dorsiflexed internally, so he's pulling his toes up towards his shin. He's gonna push back against the pressure, go to full knee extension, terminal, 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 lock the quad, and then lift the leg up without external rotation of the foot. So if you start seeing the femur rotate out externally, you know you've gone too far. So he's gonna bring it down, bring the knee back up into flexion, drive his heel back into the wall, hard, push down into the wall, all the way through terminal knee extension, and then lift up about 3 or 4 inches into abduction. Now, if we do this for 2 minutes, or roughly 20 repetitions, you'd start to see Ryan's face start to pucker up because he's gonna feel this into his hip, okay? Now, a lot of times we overuse the TFL musculature, which is the front lateral hip flexor. We'll overuse the lateral externals or extensor muscles like your piriformis. And so eventually what ends up happening is the leg kicks back, you don't lock the knee, and you start to rotate open with the knee and externally rotate rather than keeping it in an internally rotated position and abduct. So don't confuse abduction, which is again from the midline up, with external rotation. So there's no external rotation here. Keep it abducted, terminal knee extension. You should feel this inside muscle of your quad, and then lift up from there until you begin to feel your toe reach up. Now, if done right, you're gonna feel a solid burn in the gluteals, and again, you would be shooting for about 2 minutes of time under tension. So for a lot of people, that's pretty challenging. They start to compensate pretty quickly, literally 30 seconds, 40 seconds into it. You'll start to bow the back, your neck will come away from the wall, kind of like how Ryan's is right now. Right, got some tight hamstrings on this guy. And again, these are relationships that we gotta subdue. So make sure that you keep your nice vertical neutral center of mass, keep your head, back, and ribs against the wall. Make sure that as you kick back, your knee doesn't rotate open, and you're gonna shoot for 2 sets of 20 repetitions with a minute of time in between and do both sides of the body. And that takes us through integration. Our last segment is on strength. Here's where we show you how to target specific muscles that need to be stiffer all the time. It's called passive tone. And once again, we're gonna get into your gluteals. This is all about glutes today. So today is a single leg hip press. We're gonna give you some key pointers on how to keep the symmetry of your joint alignment in the right position so that you can get the most out of those gluteals and help to maintain the lumbopelvic hip stability and again, the development that you're looking for. So let's get going. Ryan's laying on his back, and what we're gonna do is lift the opposite leg up. This is gonna go into flexion. The working leg is gonna be on the left side. Now to set the position up, we want to make sure that the hip line is neutral, and that needs to happen or remain that way through the duration of that hip extension movement. Now he's going to be working his left gluteal complex in concert with the extension pressure of his lat on his opposite side of his body. So his left arm, or rather his right arm, is pushing into the table, and he's going to be pushing down through the heel on the right side together. And that's going to engage his posterior oblique sling. Now at the same time, I want him to pull the toes up a little bit, and as he's pushing down into the table, he's almost pushing away, almost like he's extending the knee. So Ryan, give him an example of what it looks like. He's pushing up, drawing his hip up as high as he can without overusing his extensor muscles in the back. Now what you'll notice that his knee and his hip and his shoulder are almost on a diagonal line, and his other hip isn't dumping over. And it's not, again, dropping down on this side, on the same working side. He's keeping his hips neutral. Now go ahead and come on down. Now, if you see variations of that as you push your hip up, you're gonna see that there might be strength imbalances going on here. You may not have enough anterior oblique sling to hold the pelvis neutral against the pressure of the leg pressing. Or you might see that the laterals overwork so that when you push up, your hip might dump and your knee might rotate out. If that's going on, you're really not using your gluteals, or at least not them fully. You're using your lateral rotators. You're losing it through your lumbopelvic hip system because you don't have enough intrinsic control of your pelvis. And again, you're gonna start leveraging other muscles like your hamstrings or your groin musculature, etc. So we wanna make sure that those hip lines, the ASIS or the hip bones, are even to each other as you push up, and you're gonna reduce the range of motion if you see that it starts to distort. So again, he's gonna breathe in, push up, and then breathe out and slowly let his body weight come back to the table. And again, his goal here is to try to hover at the bottom. Hold it for about a second as you breathe out for a count of 4, and then breathe in and pop back up. Now as he presses, again, he's pushing down into the heel and pushing the leg away, just like we practiced with that window washer integration movement. And again, he's controlling his pelvis by retracting again through the ribs on the right side, and flexing his groin, pulling the body weight across the midline. So essentially he's getting his anterior oblique sling from his right groin, right oblique internal, and left external oblique to help counteract the pressure of the posterior oblique sling on the opposite leg, the left leg, with the right lat. Those two mechanisms help to keep the hips stable, and then you'd have, again, a nice strong contraction of the gluteal. So 2 sets, 20 repetitions, a minute of time in between, and that's gonna be it for your strength. Thanks everybody for joining us again for another episode of Design to Move. We hope you got some information out of this today that's gonna help to restore your functional movement patterns and to give you a better quality of life when you're exercising. Today we focused on gluteal inhibition. Remember, this is when the glutes don't like to contract and we start to use other muscle groups instead, like the hamstrings. A lot of times this has to do with ultra-tension relationships around the front hip flexor muscles that we reduced and the overuse of the hamstrings behind us. This could be for other reasons like tight calves, can impact or be impacted from the upper body musculature, like the lats, even the pecs and the neck musculature, all sorts of other relationships. So remember, we do have a whole series on movement imbalances and distortion patterns. So if you're looking for more information, make sure to check it out on our channel here. And we did write a blog on the series, so make sure to read up on that if you need more information or if you want to dig a little deeper. One more time, we do offer a free motion analysis, a virtual movement screen online. We do that through our website. You can do that at admin@fluidhealthandfitness.com. So make sure to reach out to us if you have questions. Remember, your body's designed to move, so we encourage you to stay in motion, and we'll see you next time for another episode.